don't be afraid to take influence from other producers. A lot of people like to pretend like they've just completely created their signature sound out of nowhere. Like you got to get it from somewhere, and just take your favorite elements that you really truly identify with from your other rap producers or other genres of music and try to just experiment with putting them together like in a way that feels genuine to you and not forced.
Microphone check, 1 2. What is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service. Here we are again at the end of a rainbow. As soon as you hear the iconic Hey Tony tag, you know you're about to hear an absolutely banging beat. With me today is Tony Seltzer, a Brooklyn-based producer who's known for his catchy, ear-grabbing beats that feature hard drums and a booming bass. Tony's catalog casts a wide net, having worked with major label artists as well as artists on the cutting edge of the indie scene, producing albums with the likes of WiFiGawd, Gabe Nandez, and most recently Wiki with 14K Figaro, one of the best albums of this past year. In this episode, Tony gives us insight into the development of his signature sound, the inspiring story surrounding how he made the leap to being a full-time producer as his career, and the making of his great recent collab records in Pangea and 14K Figaro. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth artist interviews, album reviews, and general rap commentary on the best that the underground rap scene has to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. Tony Seltzer, how you doing today?
I'm great. Fantastic. How about you?
I'm fantastic. Man, ever since I spoke to Wiki, I think it was early 2023, he teased this record you have, 14K Figaro, and at the time, I was just so fucking hyped. I was so hyped because at the time, like until I literally had that conversation with him, I had no idea this was on the radar. And I was just getting into your music like on a very significant degree. Just really been like riding that wave since like 2022, really. And yeah, I was just like, this is gonna be a perfect combination. But even then, I did not expect it to be this good. So just congrats on a very successful release, and I just think you guys delivered.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, we definitely worked super hard on it and took our time with it over the span of years, honestly, and kind of kept it low key up until the rollout, just to because we knew it would be, impactful. And also, I've been working with Wiki for a long time, so to be able to do our first like collaborative project was really cool.
Yeah. And so I want to start with this. You truly have one of the most, I feel, most gratifying and recognizable producer tags in the game, period. It's up there with like the absolute, like my favorites. And I did some digging prior to this and read up on the origins of how this came to be. And I found it fascinating because it's not what I expected. Usually, in my kind of understanding, a lot of times producers kind of just stumble upon a really cool sound that either like says their name or just says something cool, and they're like, ah, that's dope. And I think that's sick. But
Yeah.
you actually, from what I understand, tailor-made this tag yourself. So could you, for those who are unaware, kind of give people a quick explainer on how this came to be?
Well, I at first I came up with the Tony Seltzer alias. I had an alias before this one. So while in the process of coming up with the Tony Seltzer alias, I knew that a tag would be very important for it. I've always liked tags, and I just especially wanted Tony Seltzer to have a recognizable tag. But I was looking through Sopranos episodes, looking for like somebody calling out, Tony being the main character. Somebody's got to say something Tony at some point, looking for maybe like specifically a Hey Tony. Going through episodes, I just couldn't find the right thing. And eventually I gave up and I said, you know what? Let me just get my dad to record it. So I just voice memo on my phone, went up to my dad and I was like, can you just scream, hey, Tony? And that's that. He just first take did it. And that's the tag. I think I pitched it down like a little bit too. But yeah,
Man, it's a genius. It hits so hard. You drop it at the perfect time right before the bass hits or something. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I definitely have. I have a couple other tags I use too, but sometimes artists will specifically tell me to put the "Hey Tony" tag if it's not in the beat already.
Do you I mean we'll get into your like kind of signature sound. That's kind of right very related. Like when you say you have other tags, are they like sound effects?
I do have sound effects that I use.
Like that bird, is there a bird chirping one? Is that birds chirping? It sounds like kind of like
oh,
weird manipulated birds
like a
chirping.
laugh, maybe like a really high laugh. I have this one
Maybe
before
because
I recorded myself laughing and like pitched it way up. I have a few different sounds that I use, and definitely in 14K we actually did made the conscious decision to after the tape was done to go do a run through and add sound effects to the whole tape to kind of make it a cohesive to bring everything together, you know.
no, I love that because that's kind of I really noticed it the most on this record, even more so than, you know, other collab records where you've produced front to back. Like, yeah, I don't know if it's like light beams or I thought they were birds chirping, but I think the birds chirping one is the laugh. Because
Yeah,
again, it didn't
there's like
sound
a
proper like
little
that.
laser blast I
Yeah.
use, some air horns, just things I've stumbled on upon on this road that I add to the collection.
And yeah, like talk me through how you kind of develop this signature sound of yours. Because outside of just those kind of like markers, you also just have like a sound as it relates to that, the drums and the bass. And so just talk to me about how you develop that blueprint.
Yeah, so I think definitely my focus in beats, or I guess if I'm collaborating with another producer, which I do all the time, and in 14K, I think more than half of the tracks are collabs with other producers. I'm almost always the one doing the drums and bass and then sequencing of the beat. And I before making beats was a drummer, and specifically I played a lot of like death metal drums,
Mm.
really into like death metal, and the just the heaviness and the distortion of that metal sound. I think I kind of, and also other little things, just like where the bass is hitting, or maybe some like polyrhythmic elements, like just kind of some nerdy stuff that I took from the death metal. I like to put in use in the drums of a rap beat, even if it's a simple beat. Like I tend to make everything a little distorted, even if it's not super noticeable. I think the distortion that I use maybe has kind of become a signature sound of mine. And then I have like honestly just like a few different kick drums that I use if I'm putting a kick on the beat that are you pretty hard hitting. I think those are also recognizable at this point.
Yeah, I exactly like because I can tell. I feel like I feel the same with a producer like Neptunes or Pharrell, where like
Mhm.
there's certain kicks or certain drums where I'm like, before you hear, I mean, obviously he has that little like I don't know what you call it, but that like thing where like at the beginning of the beat he like replays it a few
Yeah,
times,
the
like
four count is
yeah, the
yeah.
four count thing. Other than that, like even just past that, I'm like, oh, it's a Pharrell beat, this is a Neptunes beat, just because of
Yeah.
that type of kick. And with you, it's very similar in the drums and. I always challenge rap fans to listen to death metal or black metal because exactly what you're saying, that's what drew me into metal music was just the fucking drums.
Yeah, for sure.
Crazy. And it's just like really like it excites me with artists like Deathspell Omega. I'm not like some big head necessarily, but I do know some of the classics out there. And yeah, I totally agree. That's interesting that you have that background. I wasn't aware.
Yeah, for sure. I always loved hip hop growing up, but once the drumming really brought me into the metal world because just it's so extreme. Like literally, these drummers are just doing extreme things, like it's a sport almost. So I got really into that, and then just getting so used to that sound, everything so over distorted, and the bass so up front. I kind of definitely think that I was able to use that in the beats world, you know.
Yeah, and you were saying you mess with like polyrhythmic like in kind of rhythms like that. I definitely like that about your music that it you really play with the drums and the bass like it's a melody almost. There's a lot of
Yeah,
times a really recognizable, fun, wavy bounce to it that's really cool and unique.
appreciate it. Yeah, I try to, I'm always struggling with like if I sit down to make a beat alone, I'll oftentimes do too much in a sense. Then I'll play the beat for a rapper and realize, I put way too much shit on this beat. Like there's no room to rap on it. You know what I mean? So I try to find the good middle ground between a good minimal beat for someone to rap on, and still adding the things that I consider, true to myself, which is just fun little stuff like that.
And getting to like how that signature sound is developed, like what advice do you have for other producers out there to find that kind of trademark for them?
I guess just, don't be afraid to take influence from other producers. A lot of people like to pretend like they've just completely created their signature sound out of nowhere. Like you gotta get it from somewhere, and just take your favorite elements that you really truly identify with from your other rap producers or other genres of music and try to just experiment with putting them together like in a way that feels genuine to you and not forced. But yeah, don't be afraid to be influenced by other producers. Like it's not like I'm the first producer that put a heavy kick drum and bass you know, like
Hmm.
like Lex Luger specifically, the Waka Flocka Flame album was a huge turning point for me in my production because I'm hearing those beats and I'm like, these sound like metal. These sound like breakdowns, like I could go
That's so
really
true. Like hard in the paint. Yeah.
pits, like exactly like those beats are so hard. So definitely just I took a lot of influence from his sound and then tried to do my own spin on it. And then I also love Jay Dilla and like really soulful, like groovy, non quantized beats. Just don't be afraid to take influence from other places, but and also don't just try to do what's current because you're never going to really find your sound if you're just trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. Just do what's fun for you. If you want to take some influence from what is happening right now, great. A lot of rappers like to make keep their beats current.
Hmm.
Strategically it makes sense to do that, but just have fun with it. I think at the end of the day, that's the biggest advice is have fun with it. Because if you're genuinely having fun with it, and experimenting and having fun with your sound, that's how you're going to find your sound.
And you can hear that as the listener when someone's really kind of doing what they want to do. It's
Yeah.
very apparent. It's not honestly that hard to tell. And yeah, I think like a lot of times, a lot of the really great innovation, especially as hip hop continues to age, like obviously I'm sure as I say this, there's going to be some like new kind of production style that is like I couldn't even imagine that'll come out in the next 5 years. But generally, a lot of the great evolution and like innovation comes in the margins. Like it's like, oh, yeah, kick drums, heavy bass, but like doing it a little more differently, tweaking it this way, and that becomes super cool. Like
Yeah.
whole waves come with just like minor intricate
Mhm.
tweaks.
For sure. I mean, even just the concept of no kick drum was mind blowing to me with like the plug beats and, from
Hmm.
Beethoven to the plug lineage to like down to Stupid Cool, who's like making these beats with the tiniest little sounds and the smooth bass with no kicks in it. And it's like almost like the opposite philosophy of where I'm coming from with my beats, where I want the punchiest, hardest drums of all time.
Hmm.
You're Stupid Cool making these beats, and I'm like, damn, this is incredible. I'm gonna take some influence from that and try to see what I can do with it. Now that being said, I'm not about to just like make beats like he does. No one can,
Yeah.
but just keep his philosophy in mind, where not every beat needs to be punching you in the face necessarily. That being said, I usually do end up making my beats pretty punchy, but
Hmm.
even when I'm trying not to, it just is what it is.
Yeah, and you've definitely got range, and in addition to those banging drums as we've talked about, I think especially in recent years, I've seen you go to really cool places with your sound. You even also one thing I found out as I was prepping for this, like you have an Earth Eater remix, with the
Yeah.
track Cuckoo or Blink. Is it Blink or is it
Oh, Cuckoo Chloe, track
Cuckoo
blank.
Chloe?
Yeah, yeah. No, I did. I remix some Earth Eater and I remixed the Cuckoo Chloe song
Yeah,
blank. But I have multiple songs with Earth Eater.
I I I've only recently heard and gotten into Earth Eater like within the last like literally 2 months
Yeah,
through a
she's
friend.
incredible. Yeah.
Incredible.
We have on her album Trinity, I did the song called Spill the Milk, produced by me and my friend Quez. On my Hey Tony project, actually one of the singles is called Joyride, which was me and Earth Eater. And my
Hmm.
friend
Yeah.
Beth co-produced that with me.
That's really interesting. Yeah, you just really have a lot of range. And so like when it comes to building out your beats, I think you kind of touched on it earlier. Like what does your process usually look like?
So I do, as I said, I love to collaborate with other producers, not because I can't make a whole beat myself. Like, of course, I can make a whole beat myself, but honestly, I just enjoy being with people, like on a social level. I just like hanging out with my friends and making beats together, you know? So oftentimes, a lot of my beats end up being collaborations with friends, and they'll usually do the melodic aspect, whether it's chopping up a sample and adding some synth to it or like a more synth driven melody. And then I'll have them give me the melody in either just as like a 2 track or as stems. And then I'll add my drums on top, which I usually start with like the hi-hats, claps, snares, percussion. Then I'll do like the 808 kind of almost last, and then the kick, then decide if I'm gonna put a kick or not, and then kick like as the final element. And then from there I kind of sequence it out. And with the sequences, I like to, keep a kind of hook verse, keep that in mind that an artist is probably going to want to do hooks and verses, but not necessarily adhere to that depending on the direction of the beat. And if I am doing the beat entirely by myself, I usually either am chopping up a sample and try to get creative with the sample chopping, just put it in the simpler in Ableton and run it across the keyboard and have all the different chops, and just do fun stuff to it. I mostly end up focusing on the drums when it comes to the collaboration. So
Yeah, I wonder like what kind of process do you prefer more? Because I think a lot of producers, especially kind of more indie producers, like naturally they're gonna be producing by themselves like most of the time. But that's an interesting kind of process and something that you definitely see more of in the more kind of like major label records, mainstream records. What are kind of some of the pros and cons that you see to that, and what kind of you get the most
well,
out of?
I guess, pros for me of making beats with other people is I just like to be with other people and also just bouncing ideas off each other,
Hmm.
bouncing energy off each other. It's like maybe I will push myself to do something I wouldn't usually do with the drums because I'm with someone else and we're talking about this or we're playing each other music beforehand. And I think the advantage of that to me is just it's fun. Like I'm doing
Hmm.
this, this is my career, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't having fun doing it. So I like to collaborate with other producers because it's fun for me. When you're talking about the major label world, you're getting more into the world of where there's 5, 10 producers on a beat, which is cool too. Not opposed to that, but I think that becomes a little bit more of like an assembly line, like this
Yeah.
is the hi-hats guy, this is the 808 guy, this is the synth guy, and that's great too. And everyone just has their own thing, and I completely respect producers who just are locked in by themselves and only make beats by themselves.
Hmm.
I've had time periods where I've felt like that. But recently I haven't been as much. I'll come to the studio alone to try to make beats alone, and I'll be like, huh, it's just like almost hard to focus sometimes, like having someone else helps me lock in and get stuff done.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think when you talk about some of the more major label world, like you've had a really interesting kind of career path. You've worked really with some, some A-list kind of mainstream names like Freddie Gibbs, Rick Ross, you made a track with him, I know that. And then obviously you've been working with like some of the most up and coming, cutting edge rappers in the indie scene as well. And I feel like you've overall just really navigated your career in a really interesting way, previously under the moniker Young Gutted and now Tony Seltzer. And as we talked about, you got that really distinct sound, and I think you're a really great collaborator with other MCs. And, as just as an observer of your music, it really seemed like your career took a really strong turn for the best or for the better around like 2017, 2018,
Mhm.
both from like a recognition perspective and from like an artistic perspective. And something that you kind of made a really nice post about on Instagram recently was highlighting one of the obvious turning points for you was your relationship with Wiki.
Yeah,
And you shared this story about how Wiki really changed your life, for lack of a better word, showing great faith in you and all that in your sound. And this particular pivotal moment I found super fascinating about was when you remarked how Wiki was working on No Mountains in Manhattan. So this was about 20, this is like 2015, 2014 time when that record dropped.
literally don't remember.
I
My
think
my sense of time has got is pretty
I think it's
blurry.
mid 2010s because I think Ufi was 2017 and that was after.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll go with mid 2010s. It's
Yeah.
not that important, honestly. But yeah, you at this time were still working like an office job, and one of that became a real roadblock because the studio was booked with Excel during office hours.
Yeah.
So it forced you to really take a leap, leave your job, and pursue music full time. I found this so inspiring and fascinating. So from really two kind of angles, but starting with the wiki element of it. What's kind of the key thing you've learned from Wiki as it relates to how you carry yourself as an artist and make moves?
I think Wiki just does a great job of staying true to himself and to his art, and you know, showing love to up and comers as well, and maintaining the importance of the New York City community. Like, like we're both born and raised New York City. So we came up in the scene, and then to watch the younger kids start to come up and be able to give them a platform or put them on a show or do a feature, or like for me, produce for them, like that, the importance of that, he definitely has shown that to me. Because there's of course chasing the major label artists, chasing placements, chasing the money in that way. That's one route to take, of course, and I respect everyone who's doing that. But just maintaining that, the trueness to the what we came up in, and trying to keep that moving, definitely has been inspirational to watch him to this day, do continue to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. Even just having the opportunity to have him on the show, and even prior to that, I saw one of his concerts that he had in Toronto here in like March of last year. And just being able to talk to him and seeing how he interacted with his fans. We were just literally outside the show for like almost 30, 40 minutes. He was just talking to everybody. Kai Solo was there too. Iblis was there. And yeah, it was really, I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't met him in person before. And just seeing that level of humanity and like
Yeah.
chill relatability and like, oh, he's just a guy who loves music. We're talking
I
about
know,
music.
for rappers, there's some aspect that you gotta. It's a competitive thing, so everyone has
Hmm.
to have their little ego. But definitely, he doesn't. He's a humble guy. He talks to his fans. He's not. You know, yeah, and that's definitely inspirational to be able to be around that.
And so the other angle of this that I mentioned I was really fascinated by was that aspect of you taking this risk to becoming a
Right.
full-time artist. Could
Mhm.
you elaborate on like what was going through your mind and at that time and like what ultimately pushed you to make that pivot?
Well, so at the time I was working at for a construction company. I had previously been doing just labor work for them, like for a renovation company, while I was in college. So I went to SUNY Purchase for production, for music production, and engineering. And in the summers I would work for this renovation company. So when I graduated, they offered me a job to work in their office, just as like kind of like office assistant. But they
Okay.
liked me, and I think if I had stayed with them, I would have been able to, work up a path to really being in that world. But at the same time, I recognize, I went to college for this thing. I didn't even plan on necessarily going to college. I only applied to one college, which was SUNY Purchase, because I knew of their production program. And I
Hmm.
was like, if I get into that, I'll do it. And if I don't, then I'm not going to go to college. So I was committed to the music. I knew that, but also I needed to make money, obviously, and be an adult. So I was working the office job, but I would be leaving the office job, going to work, going to make music after, with either my friends Nocturnal, Vinny Fana, or going to my boy A Lau's studio off record,
Hmm.
working with him, or working with Wiki. But once Wiki really locked in and had that project coming with XL, I was like, I either eh, can't really work on that project with him because I will be in the office, or I can just make this leap and do it. And I just was able to I had saved up some money and was like, you know what, I have this little cushion for myself. So let me just do this, and I did it. And it wasn't always easy, like not having a job. Obviously, I had to figure out ways to make money, sell beats, do whatever I had to do. but it obviously worked out for the best. And even, I would go work with Wiki in the daytimes at XL, which was on Crosby Street, and then walk straight up Crosby Street to Off Record that was also on Crosby Street, and lock in with A Lau. And that's where a lot of the major label stuff came from,
Mm-hmm.
working with him, because he's so good at navigating that world and just such an incredible producer. So just being able to have all this collaboration and be downtown, and it was really a good moment in time where I was in the studio like almost 24/7, like between XL, Off Record, working with Vinny, just moving around, always music, music, music. So I think that I dived in knowing that I had to go 100%. I couldn't slack if I was going to do that. I had to give it my all.
Yeah, that's so inspiring, man, because I mean, just being able to work full time as an artist and sustain yourself is like you're already in the top whatever percentile of human beings like to ever exist. It's amazing. And on top of that, you're making music that's true to yourself. You're not just like chasing a bag, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Which I
that's
respect
amazing.
too. Like I respect it too. I don't want to talk down on artists who are out here just trying to get the biggest placements. And there is money out there. If you want to chase that and that's your world, and I'm into that as well. Like I love getting major label placements, of course, but I just also love doing what I love doing, and I like working with underground artists too.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, like I also really love mainstream music, and I guess going back to something you said earlier, you can kind of tell when an artist is just doing something for a purpose that isn't like I really like making this music. There's the
Yeah,
kind of music, and because yeah, there's a lot of mainstream sounds, producers, rappers that I'm like super in love with. But then there's some where you can tell like you're just doing this because you like enjoy the lifestyle, which is I'm not hating other than like that's not for me. Like I'm not interested in investing my time and getting to know you and your music, really. That's when it comes down to. But it's money, it's people gotta survive. I'm not hating.
I love mainstream music too. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. I love
Hmm.
Drake, like I love it all, but I just find myself naturally kind of fitting in this world of more underground things. And my ideally, I would love to see a lot of the underground artists I work with
Be
get
elevated,
up
yeah.
to that level. That would be a great route, instead of trying to chase down people who I don't already know because they're signed.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're in a really good place right now because I'm really seeing some interesting music come out of New York in that indie scene because it's really kind of branching off into like many different directions. You got like the drill kind of hard drums type sound, and then you got like the really abstract, strange, experimental stuff too. And it's I feel like all really kind of flourishing in the recent like few years, and you've been at the center of a lot of it. So. I think there's a lot of potential for people to kind of reach that next level of,
Yeah.
success.
Hmm. Definitely.
And yeah, speaking of the kind of the other artists you've worked with, you got the likes of, just in recent years, WiFiGawd, Gabe Nandez, and then Freddie Gibbs, Pink Sifu, most recently Wiki. And while they're talented in very different ways.
Mhm.
So, like, what do you feel is like the common thread as far as it relates to like the types of artists you like to collaborate with and feel like you make the best music with?
Well, I think a lot of time it's just who's I like a lot of different kinds of music, a lot of different kinds of rap. And I think that a lot of time it's fun to link up with an artist, see if we have a connection on a personal level, and then once that's there, like see if we can make music together, and see how I can push their sound and how they can push my sound. And like, yeah, just trying out new things with people. And a lot of Freddie, I've never met Freddie Gibbs. You mentioned him a couple times. That
Mm.
was Kenny Beats. So a lot of these more bigger placements I have will be through Kenny Beats or Alau or Harry.
Yeah.
Just doing co-production stuff with them, which obviously helps me out so much. But I feel like my world that I navigate tends to be more of the underground guys.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just like to take an artist's sound and see how I can add to it and see what we can do to make something new, you know?
Yeah, and personally, like with your instrumentals, I'm like obviously they're on the kind of generally louder, aggressive side, but I feel like the loudness or aggression in your beats is like always mostly in the form of like these cavernous big kicks, big 808s, big bass lines, those rhythmic grooves you mentioned, that I feel it needs an MC or sounds best with an MC that has a certain presence and can like work with this kind of space that you create or this groove you create. And that's done in like the form of in people with like really distinct voices like Wiki, Gabe Nandez, a Pink Sifu, or these ridiculously dynamic vocalists like a WiFiGawd or Key who
Yeah.
kind of like use their vocals as instruments. I think it's just really fascinating to see how they all kind of work with your sound.
Yeah, and I definitely, to some degree cater to the artist I'm working with, just because I want to get them on something they're comfortable rapping on. But once we get a little more locked in, then I'll try to push their sound a bit, you know. Like for instance with Key, he we got to a point where while working on that album, Alpha Jerk, he would come in the studio, say, pull up a beat, don't even play it for me, just pull it up and I'm gonna go in the booth and rap on it. Like we got to that level of trust where I could just literally pull up any beat, whatever I liked, and he would go in and make a song and it would end up being freaking amazing, you know?
No, that's awesome. Yeah, like I feel like you're getting to the point with me as like a producer where even if I'm not really that familiar with the artist, if you lock in with them on like a project, I'm gonna 100% go into it with
Yeah.
open ears, but also like expect it'll be good. You're one of the main reasons why I really have started to just like fall in love with WiFiGawd's music because I've heard of him for years, would always listen and be like, oh, this is cool, but nothing really pulled me in to do the full deep dive until last year. And it is like
Yeah, he got a lot of
learn
heat.
something, man. I've been playing that song at the gym recently. Oh,
We got a
so
new
good.
project on the way.
Oh yeah.
Been working on it for a while and very excited about it. It's not done yet, but we're getting there.
Nice. Nice. And speaking of kind of recent projects of yours, before getting into this latest record with Wiki, I wanted to rewind just slightly to earlier in last year where you dropped Pangea with Gabe Nandez.
Mhm.
Now, first start with like how did your relationship with Gabe first come to be?
So I've known Gabe for a long time, actually. I met him through a mutual at SUNY Purchase that I went to when I was under the Young Gutted alias, and he was actually on. Shout out to Envy, that's our mutual. He was on one of my Young Gutted projects. I don't even think I had met him in person yet. I think he may have just sent the verse over, if I recall correctly. But yeah, the Young Gutted projects that I did were more like kind of instrumental tapes that I would put out. They would have like a song or two with a feature with a rapper.
Hmm.
And then he was living in Montreal at the time, and I ended up getting hit up to play a couple shows up there as Young Gutted. So I went up there. He let me crash at his place. Both times I went up there, it was just all love. Super nice guy, incredible rapper, obviously. And then after that, I changed to Tony Seltzer. He moved to the city, and more recently, we locked in, and yeah, did Pangea. And obviously, he went crazy with the bars. And he also likes a specific type of beat for me that not everyone will gravitate towards. It kind of has this kind of bounce that, like, you might recognize. It's just a more like kind of like a more New York tempo, almost like 100 BPM, 90 to 100 BPM,
So it's
like
a little
bounce
slower?
slower or faster, depending on how you look at it. But it's just
Right.
more dancey in a way, and something I would just consider like a little more of like a New York tempo. So yeah, it was awesome to hear him go crazy on those.
How does a track like Context fit into what you just said? Is
Uh,
that like kind of the more slower version of what you're saying?
yeah, yeah, I guess so. It depends how you're looking at the bounce, like,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, because that one's like that's probably my favorite beat on the whole thing. That or the track with the is it Trust? Duendita?
yeah, yeah. And that actually,
Those are incredible. Both very different, but just
yeah. And Gabe is
phenomenal.
obviously super versatile. Also, like he can get on a bunch of different type of sounds. Like going from my project to other projects of his, like he can hop around to, and really come crazy on different production.
Yeah, and so it really sounds like the way you kind of because you make a lot of collaborative albums. You know, you're not the type to often just rely on sending beats a little bit here and there. Like you really appreciate that. Is it seems like you're the main kind of thing that drives you to lock in with someone is that personal relationship and an acknowledgement of their skill.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I just want to keep it natural, keep things for the most part. It just feels better to me if it feels like a natural connection, enjoying the music and creating the music as well.
Yeah, and Gabe again has that kind of that voice and that ability to like I mean because even for previous to this record like he's worked with sounds I would say are in the same like realm as your beats and he just really is versatile. I think that's the perfect word because he could rap on like the Argov produced album is a lot more kind of like boom bap style. He sounds great there, but he also fucking slays your shit too.
Facts.
Okay, I want to get into 14K Figaro now. So great album, and in an excellent interview that Wiki did actually with Passion Weiss last year, he described a bit about like how you and Wiki sat on this album for a year where at this point his mind was at, he was saying, as he put it, he was in a certain integral point of time in his life where he was really reflecting on his past where you can hear that there's moments where I'm seeing the light. That's how he put it. And I can imagine from your perspective, it must have felt special being able to craft an album that was so near and dear to someone's growth as like a literal human being, as he was saying. And it's abundant off that first listen that Wiki was really opening up on this record, getting really personal.
For sure.
And this brings me to a patron question out right now. Shout out to Dano, Free Music Empire. He asks, and I'm paraphrasing because he sent this as a very long voice note, but he basically was saying that you make beats that could theoretically sound perfect for a group like the Locks. Like
Mhm.
but yet you routinely have artists like a Wiki just bare their souls
Mhm.
where they hear one of your beats and instead of going, this is a banger, let's make a banger,
Yeah.
instead go, and now this part is verbatim from Dano. He says, instead of going, this is a banger, this is a banger, they go, uh I was wounded once. Let me explain.
Mhm.
And so, what he's wondering, what I'm definitely wondering as well, is like applying this to 14K Figaro, how do you feel your beats and your relationship with Wiki allowed him to get so vulnerable on this record?
Well, I think that, obviously we wanted to kind of, I think we wanted to create that in between world where it's, you recognize this as a banger because of the beat. If you're not really listening to the lyrics, you can bop along to it because it's fun. But he is bearing his soul. He's talking about, revenge. He's letting anger out. He's letting out, sadness and just just thinking back on things. And like, it's a very reflective album, obviously, and I don't know. I think it's just it was up to him to make the choice what he wanted to do on the beats, and I think that in a sense he did what was true to him, which is just how he was feeling. And he really wanted to write these fucking bars and let them out and let out what he had to say. And he just happened to be doing it on my beats, because we're close and we're comfortable in the studio together. And, my beats are hard. And if he's got to say what he's got to say, but it's just going to be on top of my production.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with just how specific he was getting with some of his reflection too. Like, a lot of times, sometimes in rap, people can kind of just, I feel like, paint by numbers when they talk about certain traumas or certain things in the past. Like, he was very specific and detailed, not only about like personally some stuff with his career
Yeah.
and decisions he made that he regrets or is very happy he made. And yeah, I felt like I learned a lot about Wiki as a person through
Yeah.
14K Figaro. Yeah, as you said at the same time, I was just like bopping my head incessantly the whole time as well because this shit was banging. And I wonder also on the flip side with you, what did the creation of this album mean to you? Like both from like an artistic perspective and just on a personal level, being able to accomplish this.
Well, definitely just was just amazing to like lock in with Wick like that because we've been homies for so long and made music together for he had songs with Young Gutted, before I was even Tony Seltzer. But to be able to give him a platform to do such a personal piece just meant a lot to me, And also I just got some fire beats off too. Like of the song with Remy Banks. I think initially I don't think he thought that it fit within the world of the album, but I was like, nah, that's one of my favorite beats on there. Like you got to put that on, you know what I mean? Like just because I specifically wanted to make sure I got some production off that I felt was, like forward thinking and just cool beats. So I think we were both kind of pushing our limit, him with his bars and me with the production of like taking it to the next level. And then once even all the songs were selected and we had the track order, we were like, how do we take this to the next level? We added like the skits and the transitions and the sound effects. We just really wanted to make it a concise a world, like I feel like 14K is like really its own world, and it's like very personal, but it's also very fun to listen to. And it can be intense, but it's definitely just very true to both of us.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think you definitely really got some production off. I have to highlight fried ice cream because like
Yeah,
what the fuck?
that's
Like
fun. Yep.
that when I think of things in hip hop that rarely work and music rarely work is like flipping the one of the most recognizable samples ever and yet still making it good. Like that rarely happens. Like I'm thinking I don't want to say names, but there's been a trend in like really mainstream music these days of
Yeah,
just flipping these classic
yeah.
samples and they're
I think that's what we
awful.
were kind of referencing that too, almost as a joke. Is just at a time in my career, I would have not touched a certain sample because it's too recognizable. Like on some producer shit. Like, oh no, everyone knows that sample. I can't.
Yeah.
And with I think kind of like the sample drill really brought out this world of like you can sample whatever the fuck you want. You don't even need to do anything to it. Just put drill drums on top of it and it's okay. And that shit is hard. It's so cool. Like I'm super into that. So I think just that just opened me up to like, fuck it, we can sample whatever we want. So we did that. It just
Yeah.
fully just went for it. Like everyone's gonna know what this is. So it's
I mean,
fun.
you chopped that up in a way that was still like just a whole entire different experience, and the way that Wiki and Z Loopers were flowing on that was
Yeah.
like just unbelievable.
Yeah, that was definitely a fun one to make for sure.
Yeah. And in the same interview I previously referenced, Wiki kind of talked about, you just mentioned it, like you really honed in on each detail, like where writing occurred, more thinking, more writing, you piecing together each beat carefully. Talk to me more about this like clearly diligent creative process that went into making this. And specifically the sound, like what was the vision for what you and Wiki wanted this sound to be like?
I think at first we just were making songs. He would come to the studio, I'd play beats, he'd pick one he liked, he'd write, we'd make a song. Then after we started to stack songs up, I think the vision started to come together. And then that's when we kind of honed in for like the rest of the creation of the songs to like complete the world, especially for him in his lyrical sense, to make sure he could say everything he wanted to say, make sure he had this song about this and this song about that, that touched on everything. And then for me, for my production too, like if we were leaning toward a certain type of beat for a few songs in a row, I would make sure for the next one to play a completely different type of beat so I could have beats that were kind of, you know, all over the place in that sense. Yeah, and then I think once we really started choosing the songs that were definitely going to go on it, so we could figure out what else we needed, what we were missing. And then even once we had all the tracks together, I went and I would just chop up samples and make a quick like sample flip beat, and he would write a quick verse and throw it at the end of a song. There's a few songs that have just like a little other song at the end of it,
Hmm.
just to really meld the whole world together.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of diversity, and you mentioned it. There's a lot of interesting sample choices. There's even some kind of softer elements at times that I like Lily Pad that I found just
Mhm.
incredible. And then there's a ton of beat switches or these little epilogue tracks. That's very kind of like
Yeah.
Pete Rock-esque in a way. What is it about like Wiki's rap style and kind of push you to make beats in this way where there's all these kind of transitions that are very frequent?
I think that he had a lot of bars that he wanted to get off, and me as a producer, almost like in a self-conscious way, like once we're getting into minute 3, minute 4 of me hearing my beat over and over again for that long, I would be like, I want to make a switch, because people are going to be honed in on your lyrics, and that's amazing, but I want to make sure that the production is also moving in the background too, because he can obviously come and bar out on a sample loop beat, and that's amazing. But I just wanted to, as a producer for myself for this project, push it to the limit where there's going to be changes. The beat's going to maybe switch entirely, or just like morph a bit, or the drums are going to change, or the sample is going to change. Just to keep the production interesting. You know, because I do,
Yeah.
like with WiFiGawd, for instance, will make a song and it'll be a minute long. There's not a lot of space for me to do beat changes necessarily in there. So I'll just make the beat, he'll rap on it, it's a minute, perfect. But once we get into these longer amounts of time, I feel like I need to make the beat go other places.
Yeah, I feel like when you mention like all these additional sound effects and all that stuff to make it a real your own world, I really feel that because I feel like all these kind of transitions, like on the first listen, I was just like, damn, this is the same song. Like I had those thoughts a lot, but then after that, it was just so second nature that I was like, oh, this is just like how this album is. Like I just kind of fully like gave into it, all the kind of wackiness of
Yeah.
it, and
I would even say chaotic at times, like just
yeah,
like,
exactly.
whoa. And I think we just really wanted to embrace that, like the kind of that chaos.
And yet though the sound effects, those kind of make it all the skits as well. They kind of make it all fit. And then Wiki also, I was really impressed too with just like given how many bars, how personal he's getting. He tends to like very much reference similar themes or ideas or even kind of like lyrical ideas or references multiple times throughout the whole album. So it just really gives it that cohesion for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and I think their beats just like the grooves in them gave him such like an opportunity to show off like his like very malleable flow, and it allowed you to just fucking showcase such a dynamic performance as a producer. Like this is truly the one of the absolute best produced albums of the year, like hands fucking down.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so before we wrap up, like what you kind of touched on it with the Wi-Fi God mention, which is sick. What's some upcoming music, other merch or tour dates you wanna shout out to anybody?
Well, I don't have any tour dates as of yet, but I actually am considering getting back more into the DJing world, which I kind of took some time off from because of COVID, and I had kids, and just yeah, I took a little time off from DJing, but I think I'm going to lean more into that in the
Hmm.
coming year. I've got a project with Trip Jones that we're rolling out right now,
Yes.
Flames Volume 2, that I'm super excited about. We actually put it together really fast. We work really quickly together, and that's coming out right now. Always working with my boy Vinny Fana. We got new stuff in the works. What else have I got? I've got something that I can't announce it yet, but super excited about it. Another collab situation with an artist that's coming out, I think pretty soon, but very excited about that. And then yeah, just like locking in with new artists. I see a lot for this coming year. We have a good flow going in the studio right now, very communal vibe, people coming through and just cooking up, and a lot of great things happening.
Yeah, Trip Jones is another one that I got hip to through your album. I think it was like the one you dropped in 2022 with them. I really like that one.
Yeah, we've been working forever. Like Trip from I would be in his bedroom with one. He had one KRK speaker. I would make a beat and he would rap on it, go in his closet and rap. We would smoke 40 blunts, and we've been working forever, so it just felt right to like lock in again and just make something fucking sick. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, well, really appreciate you coming on the show, man. I'm such a huge fan and I'm just so excited to see where you go from here. 14K Figaro. Like it's just personally it's just really like I feel almost proud weirdly. And, like when I see artists that are just doing things the right way and then have that kind of collab in heaven type opportunity and it just like delivers and then some, like that's just it makes me feel good. It's inspiring and yeah, I'm just really happy and excited to see where you take your career from here because The beats are
Appreciate
getting
it.
better, the albums are getting better, everything's kind of on the up and up. So really excited to see what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. It's going to be an exciting year. I'm excited for it.
All right, well, I'll leave you there. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Peace.
You too. Take it easy.
Peace. So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.